right now.
We are talking about this at this table, all of us, exposes that this is a pretext piled atop another pretext. Absolutely. We all know this is not about DEI policies. We're not even really talking about it this way.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at something genuinely wild. A cable news panel sat down to break down whether the FCC is using its regulatory power to pressure ABC over jokes that Jimmy Kimmel made on his show, and what starts as a simple, legal discussion turns into one of the cleanest panel takedowns you will see all week. A conservative defender named Joe walks in trying to spin the story as a routine DEI inquiry, and the liberal side absolutely refuses to let that pass. Ted Cruz gets quoted, JD Vance gets quoted against himself, and somebody on the panel says, "I don't remember about a major news event in a way that has to be seen to be believed." Stick around till the very end, because the closing exchange is where the entire defense quietly falls apart, and you do not want to miss the mic drop line that ends the segment. Also, drop a comment and let me know which part of the world you are tuning in from today. I genuinely love seeing where everybody is watching from, and it makes the comments section a lot more fun for all of us. Alright, let's get straight into it.
Do we want the FCC policing the content of speech? Because that's a totally different thing. The First Amendment applies to governmental action. It doesn't apply directly to ABC. And so if the FCC is throwing its governmental weight around to try to influence speech, to try to punish certain speech, that is where the First Amendment is violated.
Punish, throw your weight around, going back to the first segment. When you talk about regulation, if the biggest thing that's changed since Ronald Reagan's horrible assassination attempt at that same hotel, and we were talking about it in the break, is the internet. Things now on the internet make us want to hate each other because we're team red or team blue because it makes people literally rich.
For a while, it seemed that the free speech argument was the argument being made on the right by people like Elon Musk, by people like JD Vance, who last year went to Europe and lectured them about protecting free speech. Listen.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square.
Unless you are a late night comedian, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, or frankly anybody who criticizes President Trump, they won't defend your right to say things they disagree with then.
Well, the president's not prosecuting, Jimmy Kimmel. He's saying he should be fired, and that could be his opinion. If you joked about someone's death, which he believed he did, go ahead, criticize him.
The government doesn't necessarily.
So he's using the government to bring something that they brought in March of 2025. They started this in March of 2025.
You can use the government's regulatory power. I'm not talking just about this, because don't forget
that was the leading.
Brendan Carr made this threat first last fall. So the threat of using the government's regulatory power to police speech and police the actions of private corporations, that has been unequivocally put on the table. And I'm not the hold on a second. I am not the only
letter is about the DEI policies.
I am not the only person saying that. Here's Ted Cruz today. He says it is not the government's job to censor. I do not believe the FCC should operate as the speech police. Ted Cruz. He is no
I would ask you and Ted Cruz.
Hater. He's no rhino.
Where in Chairman
he believes that this action, and he was consistent. The last action, the last comments by Brendan Carr, he was very clear that he believed that that was a clear evidence of jawboning, which is using the threat to coerce speech. So it doesn't require that you throw somebody in jail. Just the threat of using regulatory power to coerce their actions
getting threatened.
Is what is happening.
Clear, the FCC is not threatening to throw anybody in jail. It's not
so are you denying that Brendan Carr did not issue a threat in the fall to ABC or to Disney that they
Chairman Carr's letter in March 2025
Joe, simple
was about
question. Did Brendan Carr in the fall say that he would take a look at Disney's FCC licenses because of the comments that Jimmy Kimmel made?
I don't remember, but I can tell you what he put in writing.
Well, I can tell you. Hold on a second. I can tell you. He did say that. So given that he said that, do you acknowledge that that's him using his power as a government entity to try to coerce the actions of a private company.
You have to understand something before we go any further. The First Amendment was never written to protect you from your boss. It was written to protect you from the government. And Ellie nailed it when she said the First Amendment applies to governmental action. It doesn't apply directly to ABC. That distinction is everything, because the second a federal agency starts leaning on a private company to influence what gets said on air, you have crossed a line that the founders specifically drew in ink centuries ago. And this is the part that blows my mind. Just last year, JD Vance flew to Munich and lectured an entire continent about free speech. He stood there and said, under Donald Trump's leadership, "We may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square." Beautiful sentence. Sounds principled. Sounds American. Except apparently that promise comes with an asterisk the size of a billboard. Unless you are a late-night comedian, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, or frankly anybody who criticizes the president, they won't defend your right to say things they disagree with. That is not a free speech philosophy. That is a loyalty test wearing a free speech costume. And the moment that really seals it for me is when the liberal panelist pulls out Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz. The man is not exactly handing out compliments to liberals on a Tuesday afternoon. And even Cruz said it is not the government's job to censor. I do not believe the FCC should operate as the speech police. When you have lost Ted Cruz on a free speech question, you are not standing on principled conservative ground anymore. You are standing on something else entirely, and everybody at that table knows it.
You are trying to stretch something that is on paper that you can read with your own eyes and see. The chairman's letter involves Disney's DEI policies, which the FCC has been regulating equal employment practices since something like 1968 or 1969. Every time a license gets renewed, they have to apply the same standards to everybody, and one of those standards is employment practices. If Disney has,
I mean, it's a good question. Why aren't they applying this standard across the board?
Well, when
why
they get their license renewed, they will.
Well, hold on.
But if Disney has nothing to hide about their employment practices, why not go
Disney's licenses are not up for renewal.
They're up in 2028.
Yeah, but they are not up for renewal right now.
The way we are talking about this at this table, all of us, exposes that this is a pretext piled atop another pretext. Absolutely. We all know this is not about DEI policies. We're not even really talking about it this way. We know it's about the content of speech. We know it's about the jokes Jimmy Kimmel made. We know it's about the kind of things that he says. That's what's prompting all of this.
I would have made it about DEI. I got interrupted 20 times.
Which broadcaster hasn't made commitments to do this
Disney
kind of
has
DEI
a policy
hiring?
that 50% of
do you know
characters
any broadcaster that hasn't done this?
Underrepresented groups.
Do you know of any broadcaster that hasn't made similar commitments since 2020?
No, and when their licenses get renewed, I imagine
but the license
FCC,
isn't up for renewal. What we
the
know
FCC
is that the process was actually expedited here. In fact, it seems as though they've expedited the process in the last couple of days. Why do you suspect that happened?
The process began in March of 2025. It was done over the last year. You pointed out something that happened in the fall. So this has been ongoing for
I'm asking you why they're expediting now.
I'm just telling you that there is a ongoing inquiry by the FCC. And if Disney has nothing to hide about their DEI policy,
the answer is not convenient.
I don't think it's in good faith to suggest that things that happened in recent history that were big stories at the time didn't happen. They happened, right? We know that Brendan Carr's threats to Disney that was the big story. And he was crystal clear about it. Even Republicans had to rebuke him. And that's why they ultimately backed down and they put Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. So we can't pretend like that didn't happen. We can't pretend that that's not the context. We also can't pretend that the context isn't that Trump has specifically asked and told ABC that they should take Kimmel off the air. So all of that, Joe, I mean, if you're being honest.
You're forgetting that Disney has been in the bullseye of the Republican Party since Ron DeSantis 5 years ago.
This is the moment the entire defense collapses, and I want you to watch how it happens. The liberal panelist asks one of the simplest yes or no questions you will ever hear in cable news. Did Brendan Carr in the fall say that he would take a look at Disney's FCC licenses because of the comments that Jimmy Kimmel made? That is it. That is the whole question. And Joe, who came to the table armed with talking points and a binder full of DEI deflections, suddenly cannot remember. He says, I don't remember, but I can tell you what he's been writing. Excuse me? You came on television to defend an FCC action and you cannot remember the most reported chapter of the entire story? Let me break down why this matters. When somebody on a panel says I don't remember about a major news event from a few months ago, what they are actually saying is, I do remember and I do not want to confirm it on camera. It is the polite version of taking the fifth. And the liberal panelist refuses to let it slide. He just calmly says, I can tell you, he did say that. And then comes the line that should be tattooed on the wall of every newsroom in America. The liberal panelist says, the way we are talking about this at this table, all of us, exposes that this is a pretext piled atop another pretext. We all know this is not about DEI policies. That is what we call calling the bluff. Because everybody at that table, conservative and liberal, knows the FCC did not suddenly wake up one morning passionate about employment statistics at Disney. The timing tells you the truth. The expedited process tells you the truth. The president personally calling for the firing tells you the truth. And when Joe tries to dodge again with the DEI angle, the response cuts even deeper. The answer is not convenient for you. I don't think it's in good faith to suggest that things that happened in recent history that were big stories at the time didn't happen. That is the most polite way you can possibly tell somebody on national television that they are gaslighting the audience.
It's not a company that
if you're
Republicans
being
have
honest,
shied away from attacking.
If you're being honest, I think my final question to you is just sort of like in the last segment when we were talking about this. Do you really believe that this is the proper use of the federal government? You are a conservative.
The
okay?
FCC
JD Vance said, we will protect your right to
licenses.
say things we don't like. Is it the right use of the government for the FCC chairman to threaten a private company over speech that the president doesn't
The
like?
FCC chairman put in writing a question about the DEI policies, which they have jurisdiction to oversee. If Disney does not have anything to hide about the DEI policies, go through the
What
review
about
and
what
comply.
about his?
Disney?
What,
by the way,
what
Disney
about
has said
cars?
we're going to comply.
Okay, all right,
Disney has said we're going to comply. You're
Stipulated.
right, Chairman.
What
we're going to
about
comply.
what about cars threats in the fall? Good use of.
I don't remember.
his-
I honestly don't
Okay,
remember.
well, I'm telling you that it happened. Good use of his time or bad use of his time?
Maybe a bad
Good use of
It
the
doesn't-
government.
It doesn't
or-
preclude the fact.
I'm just asking.
It doesn't interfere.
Listen, Joe. All I'm getting at is honesty. That's all I'm getting.
I'm
at.
quoting from a letter.
Hold on a second.
stringing
All
things
I'm
together.
getting at is, can we be honest brokers at this table? Can we call a spade a spade? If you're a conservative and you have fundamental beliefs about the role of government, about free speech, can you apply those even when you like the president?
Conservatives are in favor of applying equal employment laws to companies.
And this looks like selective enforcement because
So I
every
think
single broadcaster has these
So I
DEI
think
policies.
we know what the answer to that question is.
And here is where the whole thing comes full circle. The liberal panelist closes the loop by throwing JD Vance's own words back at the table. He says, JD Vance said, we will protect your right to say things we don't like. Is it the right use of the government for the FCC chairman to threaten a private company over speech that the president doesn't like? It is a perfect question because there is no honest conservative answer that defends the action. None. And then watch what happens. The liberal panelist asks Joe directly, was Carr's threat in the fall a good use of his time or a bad use of his time? And Joe finally cracks just enough to say, maybe a bad use, maybe a bad use. That is a confession dressed up as a hedge. Because the only reason you say maybe is because you already know the answer is yes, but you do not want to hand the panel a clean win on camera. This is the part people don't realize. The closing appeal from the liberal side is not even partisan. He says all I'm getting at is, can we be honest brokers at this table? Can we call a spade a spade? If you're a conservative and you have fundamental beliefs about the role of government, about free speech, can you apply those, even when you like the president? That is not a gotcha. That is an invitation to principle, and Joe cannot accept it, because the second he does, the entire defense of the FCC action falls apart. Here's the historical piece I want you to sit with. There's a doctrine in First Amendment law called jawboning, which goes all the way back to court decisions decades old. Jawboning is when a government official does not technically pass a law or file charges, but uses the implicit threat of regulatory power to pressure a private actor into silencing speech. courts have ruled multiple times across multiple administrations that this is a constitutional violation. It does not require handcuffs. It does not require a courtroom. The threat itself is the harm. That is exactly what is being described here, and that is why even Republicans like Ted Cruz are uncomfortable. The clip ends with the perfect mic drop. So I think we know what the answer to that question is, and he is right. We do. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.